Good afternoon, distinguished panelists, guests, and friends. I am Marcia A. Mesagrande, a faculty member of the Physical Education Department of Crystal Lake College and a student of University of Bohol's Graduate School taking up Master of Arts in Teaching Physical Education. This presentation is based on the study entitled Challenges and Coping Mechanisms of Teachers Handling Physical Education to Deaf Students of the 1st Congressional District, Bohol. The background highlights that inclusive education is a fundamental right, which means all learners, including those with disabilities such as deaf students, must have equitable access to quality education across all subjects, including physical education. National and international policies emphasize that schools must provide appropriate accommodations and safe learning environments so that exceptional learners can participate fully in regular classes. In practice, implementing inclusion remains difficult, especially in physically demanding subjects like PE, where communication barriers, insufficient teacher training, and limited adaptive tools make it hard to translate policy into day-to-day teaching. Deaf students depend heavily on visual, which becomes challenging to maintain in fast-paced, motion-rich PE activities where instructions, safety cues, and feedback must be delivered quickly. Teachers handling PE to deaf students in the 1st Congressional District of Bohol have minimal or no formal training in adaptive PE. Instead, they rely on basic SPED or FSL seminars and their own trial and error strategies to manage instruction, communication, and safety. Existing literature highlights persistent issues such as lack of infrastructure and resources, gaps in teacher preparation, and weak collaboration between general and special education, conditions that mirror the local situation of PE teachers working with deaf learners. Given these systematic and classroom level challenges, there is a need to explore the lived experiences of PE teachers handling deaf students, focusing on the specific challenges they encounter and the coping mechanisms they develop in real PE settings. Understanding these experiences can provide empirical evidence to guide schools, training providers, and policymakers in designing context responsive training and support systems that make inclusive PE safer, more effective, and more sustainable for deaf learners. The objectives of the study are the following. First, identify and describe the challenges encountered by teachers handling physical education to students or deaf students in the 1st Congressional District of Bohol. Second, determine and explain the coping mechanisms these PE teachers use to address and identify challenges in teaching deaf learners. And the third one is to develop a proposed FSL integrated adaptive physical education training design or a trainer's training module based on the teacher's lived experiences and needs. To support the analysis of the challenges and coping mechanisms teachers encounter when working with deaf students, the study is anchored in several theories that directly inform its research aims. These theories are selected to guide the analysis of PE teachers' lived experiences of the challenges they encounter and the coping mechanisms they use in special and inclusive settings. The first theory is the adapted physical education theory or the APE theory. It focuses on adjusting the instructions, tools, approach, tasks, and physical environment to suit the needs of exceptional learners such as deaf students. This approach will produce a safer and more effective classroom necessary for this type of learners. These theory stresses the use of examinations to identify appropriate interventions. This theory additionally emphasizes modifying the curriculum to achieve a successful approach to teaching deaf students. Thus, having awareness and training regarding this accommodation is necessary. The second theory is the sociocultural theory by Vygotsky. Sociocultural theory focuses on the concept of learning through interaction with more knowledgeable others. It explains the importance of social network support, guidance, and communication to the learner's development. This theory demonstrates that deaf learners' social interaction with other students, including those who can hear, can positively contribute to their overall development. The third theory is the ecological system theory by Bronfenbrenner. Ecological systems theory emphasizes that different environments can shape a person. In other words, family, school, community, cultural values, and changes over time all influence a child's development. This study shows that the child's development is not exclusively a teacher factor. It means that wider support systems can affect how students learn. Thus, teachers need to understand the student's background to meet the demands of different environments. The last theory is the transactional model of stress and coping theory. This theory of Lazarus and Folkman highlights the assessment of damage, stress, and the challenges of coping with stressful events. When teaching deaf students, especially in physical education, teachers can assess different challenges and make adjustments to adopt coping mechanisms and avoid negative results. This model is also essential in improving inclusive education for deaf students. Teachers can effectively evaluate challenges and cope with the demanding educational setups or environments. For the methodology, the study utilized a qualitative research approach, specifically a phenomenological research design using Colizzi's seven-step method to capture the lived experiences of PE teachers handling deaf students. Now, the study was conducted in three special inclusive institutions of the 1st Congressional District of Bohol, namely the Bohol Deaf Academy, Tagbilaran City Central Elementary School, and Loon South Central Elementary School. The interviewees of this study were teachers who are not PE majors by nature, but are teaching PE to deaf students in the selected schools. Now, they are selected through complete enumeration with 2.5 to 20 years experience, most with special education specialization. For the research instrument, I utilized semi-structured interview guide with open-ended questions on the challenges and coping mechanisms that these teachers use in teaching the deaf students. For the data gathering procedures, the researchers secured administrative approvals by submitting formal letters to the Dean of the Graduate Studies and Vice President for Academic Affairs, obtained their written consent for study implementation. Concurrently, permission letters were sent to DepEd division offices and principals of participating institutions with all approvals documented prior to the participant contact. Informed consent forms detailing the study's purpose, voluntary participation, confidentiality measures, and the right to withdraw were personally distributed to all eight key interviewees during preliminary visits. All participants provided signed consent before data collection commenced, assuring ethical compliance. Semi-structured interviews comprised two individual interviews and one focus group discussion conducted in participants' preferred mode and utilized a three-part guide question. Audio recordings were made using a secure smartphone device only after explicit verbal and written participant approval for each session. Field notes captured nonverbal expressions and contextual observations. For the ethical consideration, we have here the informed consent, confidentially through using pseudonyms TOD1 to TOD8, voluntary participation, and member checking validation. For the data analysis, um, I utilize Colizzi's seven-step method. So in the seven-step method, we have here the first thing is to familiarize by reading all the transcripts. Second will be the researcher then identify significant statements directly pertaining to the phenomenon and extracted pertinent phrases from each interview. Third, these statements were subsequently interpreted to formulate meanings. Fourth, the formulated meanings were then systematically organized and clustered into themes that reflected patterns across participants' experiences. Fifth, exhaustive description of these themes were developed, capturing both shared and divergent perspectives. Sixth, fundamental structures were produced to highlight the true essence of the lived experience. Seventh, to ensure the credibility and accuracy of the findings, the researcher conducted member checking by returning the synthesized results to participants for validation. Any feedback or clarification offered by the participants were incorporated into the final thematic interpretations, thus reinforcing the rigor and the trustworthiness of the analysis. After data collection, the result shows that for the challenges encountered, the first emerging theme or main theme is the instructional adaptation demands. It is the essence of pre-customizing content and managing attentional overload to sustain learning flow. The theme captures difficulties with content delivery, attention maintenance, and the feedback provision as deaf learners' reliance on visual cues and processing needs disrupts lesson flow. This theme is supported by Oxford 2020, who emphasized that without adequate infrastructure and resources, teachers must improvise and adjust their instruction for differently abled students, which often includes simplifying tasks and materials. Likewise, Gisens et al. 2023 highlighted differentiated instruction as a key coping mechanism in inclusive classrooms where teachers adapt content, process, and products to learners' diverse needs, directly resonating with PE teachers' practice of reconstructing skills from basic, visually supported movements. Under the first main theme of the challenges encountered, there are three sub-themes. First is the simplification and demonstration needs. Second is the focus or distraction management. And the third one is pausing or repetition for feedback. Now let's proceed to the second main theme under the challenges encountered. We have here the visual communication constraints. Core tension of visual language's vulnerability in interactive or motion contexts eased by peers yet strained across groups. Centered on sign language limitations and peer dynamics, this theme exposes visual verbal mismatches in interactive settings. Communication barriers and the need for modified teaching styles are central issues in teaching deaf students, noting that visual communication can become strained during physical or dynamic physical tasks, according to Lieberman et al. Now, Maher's 2023 work on nonverbal communication strategies in PE for deaf students also stressed the importance of teacher positioning, facial expressions, and visual aids to maintain clarity of instruction when auditory cues are unavailable. For the second main theme, there are also three sub-themes that emerge. The first one is sign or gesture confusion, followed by the hands-free limits, and the third one is the peer dynamics. The third main theme that emerged is the safety participation tension in PE. Fundamental conflict in which the pace of activity undermines visual safety systems, requiring strategic pauses. This theme addresses safety and participation in motion heavy activities, wherein visual delays amplify risks. As reported by Fiorini and Manzini 2019, the lack of bilingual PE teachers and sign-based instruction resources creates safety risks for deaf students, and recommended adaptations in teacher positioning, visual communication, and rules to ensure participation and protection. For the third and last main theme under the challenges encountered, we have here three sub-themes as well. The first is missed cues or safety risks. Second will be the fast-paced disruption and positioning. And the third one is peer dynamics. Now, for the coping mechanisms of teachers handling PE to deaf students in the 1st Congressional District of Bohol, the result shows the first main theme, which is the Filipino Sign Language training and immersion to deaf culture. Teachers rely on basic SPED or FSL training rather than PE-specific adaptive programs, emphasizing lived immersion over formal workshops. As noted by Cawthon et al., teachers' limited sign language fluency and lack of support services undermine their confidence and effectiveness in deaf education, thereby underscoring why the participants in this study place high value in intensive FSL immersion to build their own competence. Furthermore, the World Federation of the Deaf in the year 2022 and Coleman et al. Of 2023 both highlighted the importance of cultural sensitivity and cultural sustaining pedagogy for deaf learners. Their findings support the present study's theme that engagement with deaf culture allows PE teachers to design more relevant and respectful learning experience. Now, for this main theme under the coping mechanism, we have here two sub-themes. The first sub-theme is the sign language mastery as core training, and the second sub-theme is the immersion over formal adaptive PE training. Now, for the second main theme under the coping mechanism, we have here the interdisciplinary integration and external partnerships. Cross-teacher and external networks create holistic support system beyond isolated PE classes. According to Biggs and Rossi in 2021, peer support and professional learning communities strengthen inclusive practice by building social networks and shared problem-solving among teachers, which reflects the interdisciplinary collaboration. Additionally, Lopez et al. In 2025 further showed that peer tutoring using sign language improves social inclusion and mutual respect in SPED integrated PE setting, which validates the teacher's efforts to institutionalize peer-based support systems and external partnerships. Now, for this second main theme, under the coping mechanism, we also have two sub-themes. The first one is the subject integration, and the second one is the external partnerships. Now, for the third main theme under the coping mechanism, the third and last, we have here the visual technology and equipment access. Multimedia and sports gear enable visual first instruction, compensating sensory limitations. According to Santos et al. In 2023, it demonstrated in their study that visual-based teaching strategies such as peer demonstrations and video modeling significantly improve engagement and skill acquisition among hearing-impaired students in PE, which corroborates the current teachers' use of video drills, and visual presentations as core tools. Structural barriers such as inadequate facilities, limited adaptive PE equipment, and funding constraints in special schools, mirroring the resource shortages identified in the study, and explaining why teachers had to improvise low-cost visual materials and centralized borrowing systems, according to Mawina 2024. Now, for this third main theme, there are also two sub-themes that emerged. The first one is the smart TVs and video demonstration, and the second one is the borrowed equipment and improvised aids. Now, to help us visualize the result of this study, we have here the diagrams under the challenges encountered and the coping mechanisms. To conclude, this phenomenological inquiry shows that teachers handling PE in the Bohol's first congressional district experienced visual overload movement, a core leaf tension where deaf students' reliance on static visual communication, especially the Filipino Sign Language or FSL, clashes with physical education's kinetic and unpredictable demands. This tension appears in three interconnected dimensions. The first is the instructional dimension. Teachers simplify complex rules into basic FSL while coping with attentional fragmentation from distractions, wandering thoughts, and comorbidities such as autism, often needing repeated interventions that disrupt lesson flow. For the communicative dimension, sign gesture ambiguities, hands-free limitations during contact sports, and peer mismatches create persistent comprehension gaps. For the physical dimension, safety risks arise because of unseen fouls, delayed reactions in fast-paced activities, and mid-play coaching demands that require teachers to move or reposition, reducing performance and increasing injury risk. These dimensions form one experiential contradiction. Teachers lose visual precision and timely feedback during motion. Teachers respond through pragmatic visual pre-planning, meaning they front-load solutions before breakdown happen and rely more on immersion-based pragmatism than on formal adaptive PE. Furthermore, FSL Mastery developed through FSL Upskilling and a 6-month immersion program gives teachers a level of communicative authority that they view as more effective than generic SPED workshops, which they often see as insufficient. Interdisciplinary collaborations also strengthens practice by integrating PE into broader collaborative big projects, helping reduce disciplinary fragmentation. The use of visual technologies further helps lessen cognitive overload, although this approach still has limitations that need careful consideration. The study makes an original contribution by documenting an immersion-based adaptation model that teachers develop organically in the absence of formal adaptive PE training. Unlike studies that focus mainly on formal trainings or technology, this research shows how structured FSL training, immersion, practical visual strategies, interdisciplinary collaboration, and instructional tools combine into a sustainable and context-responsive model for inclusive PE. The findings offer a field-validated framework that is relevant to the local practice and policy, especially for implementing inclusive education mandates such as RA 11650 and related SDGs in under-resourced settings. Overall, the study highlights teacher-driven innovation as a context-responsive and potentially transferable framework for sustainable inclusion in similar PE settings serving deaf learners. While grounded in the first congressional district of Bohol, the findings may inform inclusive PE practices and policy in other under-resourced schools that face comparable communication, safety, and training challenges. With all those findings, here are the recommendations. First, teachers handling PE to deaf students and students enrolled in the teacher education program, specifically the Bachelor of Physical Education, may undergo FSL integrated adaptive PE training and immersion, consisting of a 1 week intensive training covering FSL for PE terminology aligned with the K-12 curriculum. Next, institutions may utilize the insights of this study to develop professional development frameworks and interdisciplinary initiatives that foster an inclusive environment aligned with the mandates of RA 11650 and other related national policies promoting inclusive education. The Department of Education and relevant policymakers may utilize the insight of this study to evaluate teacher preparation in handling PE to deaf students. Future researchers may conduct longitudinal studies tracking the impact of FSL integrated adaptive PE training and immersion on deaf students' psychomotor outcomes and compare Bohol's inclusive PE model against other areas of inclusive PE practices. Now let's proceed to the impact or outcomes of the study. This study cites existing frameworks like RA 7277, RA 11650, Deputy Order Number 72 Series of 2009, Philippine Constitution Article 14, Section 19, and UN SDGs 3, 4, and 10 as supporting legal basis. The study proposes a new FSL integrated adaptive PE training with immersion or a trainer's training module as its key output. This includes a 5-day intensive training, 40 hours on FSL PE terminology aligned with K-12 curriculum, followed by 6-month immersion for generalists or SPED teachers and students enrolled in BPED program. Findings are recommended for utilization by administrators, policymakers, PE teachers, institutions, and future researchers to enhance inclusive practices, develop professional frameworks, and reevaluate teacher preparation. Now here are the screenshots of my bibliography or references. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for listening and may God bless us all.